My name is Danielle. I'm 39 years old and used to live in a quiet suburb of Tennessee. Or, I used to. The house I helped pay for, the kitchen I designed myself, the dining table I spent hours sanding and staining, had all become the place where my own mother shoved me out as if I were an uninvited guest. That morning, the crisp April air slipped through the kitchen window. I got up early, as usual, and brewed coffee for my mom. Sandra, 62 years old, retired early but always complaining of exhaustion. I plated some bread on ceramic dishes and reheated her favorite cheddar potato soup, just hoping for a peaceful breakfast. I thought I had grown used to Rachel, my mom's former stepdaughter, no blood relation to me. But lately, my mom treated her as if she were the only child she'd ever had. Rachel, 28, unemployed with a bad credit history, somehow always earned my mother's sympathy. And I was expected to share. I heard her slippers dragging across the wooden floor around 9 a.m. My mom entered, wearing a bathrobe, her hair disheveled, but her eyes sharper than ever. "Rachel's stopping by around 10. She's going through a tough time," Mom said, pouring soup into a bowl, like she was announcing something noble. I didn't respond. I'd grown used to the way she laid the groundwork for what she really wanted. "She needs your car to get to a job interview at the mall, and your credit card. Can you let her use it for a few days at least?" I set my spoon down, keeping my voice calm. "No, Mom, that car was bought with my own money. And the card? Absolutely not. I've helped plenty already. I need to set boundaries now." She blinked once, then her gaze hardened. "Boundaries? Who do you think you are to talk about boundaries in this house, with your boring online job, sitting at home all day, acting superior?" I pressed my lips together, not wanting to argue, but she kept going. "Rachel is family. And you, Danielle? You just hoard everything, control everything like everyone owes you something. Either give her what she needs, or get out of this house." I stood up, about to turn away, when I heard the harsh scrape of the soup pot on the stove. I turned just in time to see a wave of scalding soup flying through the air straight at me. Smack! It splashed across the left side of my face, poured down my neck and chest like liquid fire. The smell of hot cheddar clung to the sharp sting of rage. I didn't scream, I didn't cry, I just froze, staring at the woman who had given birth to me, who now looked like a complete stranger. "Get out of my house, you ungrateful brat!" she shouted, her hands trembling, not from regret. I said nothing. I turned away, soup clinging to my legs, and walked upstairs with shaky breath. The physical pain was nothing compared to the truth now blindingly clear. The woman who once held me through childhood fevers had chosen to hurl me away for the sake of a leech she called daughter. Upstairs, I pulled out a small suitcase and packed exactly 3 things: my laptop, 2 sets of clothes, and an old embroidered handkerchief my dad had given me when I was 16. Downstairs, I heard the garage door rumble open. Rachel had arrived. I didn't want to see her face. I walked past the kitchen, the smell of soup still hung in the air. My mom stood frozen, eyes avoiding mine. Maybe she thought I'd come back, like always. That I'd apologize for being too stubborn, but not this time. I clenched my car keys in one hand, opened the front door, and stepped out into the morning breeze. The soft, gold sunlight hit the burn on my cheek, a quiet reminder. I didn't belong to that house anymore. Maybe I never truly did. I drove away from my mother's old neighborhood at 9:18 a.m., the tiny dashboard clock blinking steadily like it was urging me to move faster. The smell of cheddar soup still lingered on my coat, stinging my neck and shoulders, but what truly burned was the feeling of being erased. No tears, no calls, not a single message or plea. It was as if I had never existed in their world. I had no idea where I was going, just that I couldn't go back. The streets of Franklin, Tennessee were coated in a soft morning mist. The farmhouse-style homes, steep roofs, white picket fences, all slowly faded in my rearview mirror. I passed streets tied to old memories, places I used to ride my bike in middle school, the clinic I drove my mom to when her knees gave out. Now they were just scenery. All that was left was me, and the hum of the engine, like the breath of someone newly released from a cage. I turned into a small parking lot behind a roadside coffee shop. It was the only place where no one would rush you to leave. I picked a window seat, ordered a drip coffee and a bottle of water, then pulled out my laptop as an excuse not to meet anyone's eyes. My hands still trembled slightly as they hovered above the keyboard. Dried soup clung to my sleeves, stiff and reeking of grease. I opened my email, looking for something familiar. Nothing new. But one unread message from 2 weeks ago caught my eye. It was from Cody, the bank manager for the household account I co-owned. Subject line, Asset Access Update. I clicked it open. My eyes froze on the first line. Per the request of Miss Sandra Hayes and newly appointed co-trustee Rachel Monroe, access permissions for the property at 2079 Oak Bend Drive have been updated. I went still. That house, I'd paid 40% of the mortgage over the past 4 years. My mother, who once promised to keep my name on the paperwork so everything would be fair later, had quietly restructured ownership without my signature. Rachel, who had lived there for only a few months, was now listed as co-trustee. I scrolled down, a PDF attachment, blurry scan, digital stamp, 2 signatures, one from my mother, one from Rachel. My field was left blank. At the bottom, it read, Absent Party Authorization, per Conditional Property Consent Form, 2018. I remembered. That form was from my late stepfather, drafted when he was preparing for heart surgery. He died a year later. I had signed it then, never imagining it would be weaponized to cut me out of everything. My spine chilled. Being shut out wasn't just physical anymore. I had been removed, on paper, in ink. I closed the laptop, stood up, and tried to pay using my backup credit card, the old one from my time as an operations assistant in Nashville. The payment terminal lagged. I swallowed hard. The cashier smiled politely. You might want to check that account. The system flagged it as suspended. I nodded, saying nothing. My mind clung to one question. How long have they been planning this? I walked back to the car and sat in the driver's seat, frozen. Behind me was a small suitcase with 2 sweaters, a pair of jeans, and the hand-embroidered handkerchief my father had given me. I pulled it onto my lap and unfolded it. In the lower right corner, pale blue thread spelled out, Be where you belong. I didn't belong there anymore. Maybe I never really did. My phone screen lit up, a message from an unknown number. Danielle, don't overreact. There's a way to fix this. Come talk. Rachel. I laughed, a dry, hollow sound that rose from an empty chest. No one called to ask if I was okay, but now they were worried I'd overreact. I opened the map app and typed in the last address I still had from the previous year, a self-storage facility in South Brentwood, where I'd once stored old financial records and my father's original house documents. Back then, I thought I was keeping them safe. Now, I knew better. I'd been keeping evidence. I started the engine and merged onto the highway. The clouds thickened. I wasn't just the woman who'd walked away from her mother's house anymore. I was on my way to reclaim my place. On paper, in memory, and in the truth they had buried. I stopped the car in front of Brentwood Storage and Units just before noon. The sun was hidden behind layers of gray clouds, casting a dim, flickering light across the parking lot, like the foggy mess inside my head. The front desk clerk looked up as I entered. I handed over my ID and read off my unit number. After a few seconds of verification, she gave me a small brass key and smiled like it was any ordinary transaction. But to me, that key was unlocking a buried part of my life. My storage unit was at the last row, tucked against a rusted chain-link fence. The metal door let out a heavy groan as I pulled it open. Inside was cold and dusty. Boxes were stacked in rows, plastic bins labeled in permanent marker, tax records, 2017, reservation projects, and in the most hidden corner, I saw my father's document box. My dad, Ronald Hayes, was the one who founded Hayes Market, the family grocery store in downtown Franklin. He started with a fruit cart, knocking on doors, saving enough to open a tiny shop. I grew up among receipts, inventory sheets, and late-night restocking trips with him. When he suffered a stroke 6 years ago, I was the only one who took over. I didn't just keep the store running, I expanded it. Added an organic section, revamped the freezer aisle, partnered with local farmers for fresh produce every morning. But 2 years ago, when I stepped back to work remotely, burnt out, and nudged by my mother saying, let someone else carry the weight, I never imagined that someone else would be Rachel. I pulled out a worn leather ledger from the box, my father's original account book. His handwriting was still steady, expenses and stock entries carefully noted in blue ink. There were even little handwritten notes like, extra pay for Danielle, need weekend staff, or year-end bonus, check budget with daughter. My chest tightened, my name, my responsibilities, all written, clear as day. That evening, I stopped at a small cafe I used to frequent near Thompson Station. I opened my phone for the first time in days and logged into Facebook, the platform I had stepped away from after a fight with my mother. The first thing that popped up was a post from Hayes Market Community and Family. The cover photo showed Rachel in the middle of the store, holding a basket of fruit, smiling brightly, in a t-shirt with our store's logo. Captions. Meet Rachel Monroe, the passionate young woman leading Hayes Market into a bold new era. My throat went dry. I scrolled down. Photos of Rachel leading a staff meeting, Rachel cutting the ribbon on a new produce section, Rachel speaking at a local fair, front and center with a banner behind her printed with the logo I had designed in 2019. I couldn't find my name anywhere, not once, not even in a footnote. Then I saw a comment from my mother, Sandra. So proud of my daughter. Rachel has taken the Hayes spirit to the next level. Thank you for always giving your all. I froze. I wasn't just erased. I was rewritten. An email popped up on the corner of my screen. It was from the Tennessee Business Brands Support Center, the agency where I had registered the Hayes Market trademark and slogan under my name. Subject line: brand ownership transfer has been approved. I clicked. Dear Danielle, per the ownership update request filed 3 months ago, we confirm that the brand rights to Hayes Market have been officially transferred to Ms. Sandra Hayes and co-owner Rachel Monroe. Your name is no longer listed in our registry. I couldn't breathe for a few seconds. They hadn't just erased me online, they erased me legally. My mother had quietly stripped away everything I had built with my father and handed it to someone who hadn't shed a single drop of sweat building this brand. I stared blankly at my phone screen. Then, ping, a message popped up from a former team member. Danielle, you should know. They used the presentation you made last year to apply for a $48,000 community development grant. But the name listed was Rachel's. I sat up straight. The numbness vanished, replaced by a cold, sharp clarity. I couldn't sleep that night. Every time I closed my eyes, the image of Rachel standing in the middle of Hayes Market returned. Her smug expression, the logo I had designed looming behind her like a dagger lodged squarely in my back. The next morning, before sunlight could fully break through the cheap motel curtains, I opened my laptop and typed the one name I still trusted: Clara Bennett. Clara had been my marketing assistant for 3 years, while I managed Hayes Market. A sharp, quiet young woman who always took notes during meetings. She was the only one who ever said something I never forgot. You're the only person here working from belief, not ambition. I didn't expect her to even remember me, but less than 10 minutes after I hit send, a message popped up. Danielle, I've been waiting for you to say something. Meet me at Maple and Pine Cafe, 1 p.m. I arrived 15 minutes early. The cafe was tucked in the outskirts of Spring Hill, not crowded, filled with the scent of cinnamon waffles and espresso, enough to take the edge off my heavy chest. Clara walked in right on time. She looked older, her brown hair tied back neatly, her eyes tired but steady. No small talk. She sat down and said, I kept something you need to see. From her bag, she pulled out a large envelope, slightly worn at the corners. About 6 weeks ago, Rachel and your mother hosted a private signing with someone from the local notary office. I was there to take photos for the internal event. I saw the documents they used. I opened the envelope. Inside was a copy of the share transfer agreement for Hayes Market. My name, Danielle Hayes, printed clearly, followed by a signature that made me stop cold. I had never signed this document. They wouldn't let me photograph the papers, but I know your handwriting. That's not it, not just the signature. It's the way your name is written. Totally off, Clara said, pulling out her phone. She opened a photo album. One image showed the meeting table, with Rachel holding a document. At the top, bold letters read, Internal Ownership Transfer Agreement, Hayes Market. She zoomed in. At the bottom, a note read, Signed by all relevant parties, including co-ender Danielle Hayes, to confirm full transfer of brand ownership to Mrs. Sandra Hayes and Miss Rachel Monroe. I never signed anything. Not a single word, I said, my voice barely above a whisper. Clara nodded. I know. The notary barely glanced at the copy of your ID your mom provided. No signature verification, no comparison. They forged it. And the notary unknowingly certified it, she said, her tone hardening. I've been waiting for you to come back. I kept everything, photos, internal emails, and even... She hesitated, then pulled out a printed screenshot, an email from Rachel to my mom, subject line, about speeding up the ownership transfer. She doesn't need to know everything. I clenched my fists. My head spun, not from panic, but because the pieces were falling together too perfectly. My mother had used my name to sign forged documents, exploited my trust from years ago when I agreed to temporarily hand over asset authority, and turned it into a legal erasure of me. Clara looked me straight in the eyes. You can't let this go. If you need a witness, I'm here. I nodded slowly, voice firm yet quiet. Not just a witness, Clara. I'll need everything. Photos, emails, the notarized scans, and the name of whoever handled that day. She slid a small note across the table. Notary's name, Travis B. O'Neill, Hillsborough office. I wrote it down. My next step was suddenly clear. One more thing, Clara said as I stood to leave. You should check the joint bank account. Yesterday, I overheard Rachel on the phone telling someone to temporarily freeze it for security reasons. I froze. At that moment, my phone buzzed, a message from Wesley Bank. Account 8146 has been temporarily locked due to suspected irregular activity. Please contact your local branch for verification. I looked up, meeting Clara's gaze. We've started, Danielle, she said calmly. But there's no turning back now. I took the envelope and walked out of the cafe, my mind no longer tangled. It wasn't fear anymore. It was resolve. I returned to my personal storage unit in Brentwood that very afternoon, carrying a small flashlight, a pair of thin gloves, and a strange mix of anticipation and numbness. After everything Clara had revealed, I no longer had doubts. My mother and Rachel didn't just want to replace me. They wanted to erase me entirely from Hayes Market's legacy. But I knew one thing for certain. My father hadn't spent his life building something just to have it stolen like this. Unit 17, the place where I stored everything from after my father's passing, was untouched. A thin layer of dust covered the boxes. The air smelled faintly of old paper and worn leather. I sifted through box after box, reopening folders I'd long forgotten in the chaos of business, and then, at the bottom of a battered cardboard box labeled Memorabilia Dad's Stuff, I found a heavy oak box, secured with a rusty metal clasp. The key I'd worn on a chain since he died, the one I kept like a charm, fit perfectly. The lid clicked open with a soft snap. Inside was the original ledger, brown leather-bound, stitched along the edges with his name faintly embossed, Ronald Hayes, ledger 19942015. Beneath it, tucked inside a pale yellow envelope, was a handwritten letter, unmistakably in his handwriting. To Danielle, only open if things feel wrong. I sat down on the cold concrete floor, hands slightly trembling as I opened the letter. And If you're reading this, then things may not have gone the way I hoped. I know you might be left without protection once I'm gone. And I know that some people, even family, may never accept that you are the heart and soul of our store. I left a preliminary agreement and the original incorporation records with attorney Stephen C. Hartwell, east side of Nashville. He's a man I trust. Helped me with the land contracts back in the ADS. Bring him this ledger and the small black journal I used to track financial milestones. You'll know what to do. And if they've stolen your name, remind them of this. No one can forge your father's handwriting. No one can rewrite the truth. Yeah, I didn't even notice the tears falling. Not from sadness, but because this was confirmation. My father had seen it all coming. I found the black journal, thin, frayed at the spine, filled with bold, deliberate pen strokes. Inside were records of initial suppliers, shared distributions, cash flow diagrams from as early as 1995, and most importantly, a page clearly stating my name, Danielle Hayes. Granted direct operational authority, valid through 2030 unless legally revoked through notarized agreement. I photographed everything, then carefully wrapped the ledger, the letter, and the journal in a waterproof pouch and locked it tight. The next morning, I went to the address my father had written, Hartwell and Associates, a modest law office next to an old pharmacy on Gallatin Pike. The office was small, paneled in dark wood with a German-style antique clock on the wall. When I gave my name, the older receptionist studied me carefully, then quietly stepped into the back room. A minute later, a silver-haired man in his 70s wearing round glasses came out and extended his hand. "You're Danielle Hayes?" I nodded. He didn't ask anything else, just opened a drawer and pulled out a black folder embossed with the initials RH. "Your father left this. He instructed me only to open it if there was evidence of a hostile takeover attempt." I handed him the ledger and the letter. He flipped through them and nodded. "This checks out." Then he opened the folder. Inside was the original agreement that formed Hayes Market LLC, signed by my father and me when I turned 25. The key clause lay in Section 9. In the event of a leadership dispute, the control and use of the Hayes Market brand shall be granted to the holder of the official ledger, identified as Danielle Hayes, verified by Ronald Hayes's unique handwritten code on the final page. Mr. Hartwell looked up at me. "Do you have the ledger?" I handed it to him. He flipped to the last page. His eye stopped at a small handwritten symbol, one only he and my father knew. He smiled softly. "They can't erase you, because he never gave them that power." I gripped the strap of my bag tighter. Everything they had done, faked signatures, manipulated notarizations, hijacked the brand, was about to crumble before this one file. I walked out of Hartwell's office under a light Nashville drizzle. My heart wasn't any lighter, but everything finally felt clear. I didn't choose to confront my mother and Rachel with shouting. I chose documents, evidence, and the kind of silence that carries weight. 2 days after leaving Attorney Hartwell's office, I received an email from the Franklin Community Development Foundation, the same group Hayes Market had once sponsored for an Old Town revitalization project. The email was short but pointed. "We've received concerns that Hayes Market's recent sponsorship paperwork may contain misleading information regarding its leadership. Please provide verified proof of legal ownership." I stared at that line and knew the moment had come. That night, I logged back into Facebook, the account I'd deactivated over a year ago. My old profile photo reappeared, a snapshot of me and my father in front of the store in 2015. I was holding a chalkboard that read, "Grand reopening for a Kinder community." I didn't change the photo, I just posted. Sometimes people try to rewrite history to erase you, but the truth, if you guard it, will always return. This time, it comes with my father's handwriting, a legal signature, and a contract no one can edit. I attached a photo, the final page of the ledger, with my father's signature, his unique symbol, and a clipped excerpt from his will assigning operational rights to me. Within an hour, the post had over 700 shares. Comments flooded in, from former employees, loyal customers, and my father's old neighbors. Everyone remembered how I'd revived the store after his stroke. Everyone was stunned to realize my name had vanished from the official record. I knew Vera, no Rachel, and my mother wouldn't stay silent. Sure enough, 2 days later, I received an invitation to attend a Franklin District community meeting where Rachel would present a proposal on behalf of Hayes Market titled Reviving the Heritage Block. I clicked attending. That Saturday morning, I entered the main hall of Franklin Town Hall. It was packed, nearly 60 attendees, local business owners, council members, and grant representatives. Rachel stood up front, poised, mic in hand, wearing a light blue blazer. Her voice was sweet enough to fool anyone into believing she was born to lead. We're creating a sustainable commercial space rooted in the long-standing legacy of Hayes Market, a legacy I have the honor of continuing, she said, stressing the word I. From the third row, I stood. I'd like to add some context to the family legacy Ms. Monroe just mentioned. Heads turned. A few whispers broke the silence. Rachel froze, gripping the mic. Her eyes flicked toward the exit, waiting for someone to intervene. No one did. I walked to the speaker's table, unzipped my leather folder, and pulled out a set of documents. I'm Danielle Hayes, daughter of Ronald Hayes, the original founder of this store in 1994. Here is the official ledger signed by him, along with the original business formation contract, which clearly states, I hold operational authority and am the sole legal representative of Hayes Market. I handed the papers to the community board chair, a silver-haired woman who carefully flipped through them. Her brow furrowed as she read the final page. Then she looked up at Rachel. We approved a $48,000 grant for an entity with no legal standing? Rachel's face went pale, but I wasn't finished. Additionally, in internal emails provided by a former employee, Rachel Monroe knowingly forged signatures, bypassed notarization protocols, and submitted false data to the Department of Business Registration. I held up my phone and projected an image of an email from Rachel to my mother. She doesn't need to know too much. The room fell silent. One of the grant directors stood abruptly. We are suspending all disbursements effective immediately and launching a full legal audit of the submitted files. If fraud is confirmed, Ms. Monroe's organization will be permanently removed from our partner list. Rachel said nothing. My mother, Sandra, was sitting in the back corner, half hidden, but I saw her. And for the first time, she lowered her head. That afternoon, I posted again. They erased my name from the records, but not from the community's memory. You can't rewrite the past when someone still holds the truth. Within 24 hours, the Hayes Market page was flooded with comments demanding answers. 3 key sponsors, Winston Foods, Better Tennessee Grants, and the Southfield Women's Cooperative, withdrew from all Rachel-led initiatives. I didn't celebrate. I didn't gloat. I just sat by the window, warm tea in hand, as the last rays of sunlight touched the cup. And I thought, truth doesn't seek revenge. It simply shows up at the right time, leaving lies with nowhere left to run. I walked into the mediation room with a heavy folder in hand and an oddly light feeling in my chest. Room 3, 5th floor of the Nashville Mediation Center, was so quiet I could hear the sound of my shoes brushing the wood floor. The space was small, just a long wooden table, 4 gray leather chairs, and a half-drawn curtain letting a streak of afternoon light blur across the wall. Elaine Russell, my attorney, was already waiting. She smiled politely, though her eyes were sharp. Laid out neatly on the table were the essentials, my father's most recent will, the original ledger, handwritten financial logs, the LLC agreement, a screenshot of Rachel's forged email, and the active complaints from 3 funding agencies. My mother and Rachel arrived 10 minutes later. Mom wore dark clothes and looked tired, older than she had just a week ago after the community meeting fallout. Rachel tried to appear composed, pencil skirt, white blazer, high ponytail, but her reddened eyes and scattered focus betrayed her. She clearly hadn't expected things to unravel so quickly or so cleanly. We're only here to negotiate peacefully, my mother said, her voice hoarse but defiant. I didn't respond. I opened my bag, pulled out the original business agreement signed by my father, and laid beside it the handwritten letter he left for me. Elaine started. Based on this verified and notarized documentation, Mrs. Sandra Hayes and Ms. Rachel Monroe no longer have any legal standing to retain control of Hayes Market. Furthermore, their use of forged signatures and falsified information has caused significant reputational damage, which could lead to criminal prosecution if the plaintiff so chooses. Rachel winced. That's a misunderstanding. We were just helping manage things for Danielle. I tilted my head gently. If forging my name to secure nearly $50,000 in funding and stripping legal control from your own daughter is considered helping, then we need to rewrite the dictionary. My mother stayed silent. For the first time in years, she didn't argue back. Elaine slid a printed document across the table. This is the full transfer agreement, relinquishing all operational and ownership rights of Hayes Market, including branding, bank accounts, physical assets, grants, and future commercial claims. Below is a clause that prohibits any future interference in business activities. Rachel skimmed through it, scoffed. No profit share, no honorary title, Danielle, this is extreme. Without lifting my eyes from the papers, I said, no, this is fair. This is the cost of erasing my name from the very legacy I rebuilt, with blood, sweat, and silence. Elaine's voice hardened. If you refuse to sign, we will proceed with a lawsuit based on 3 counts: forgery of notarized documents, misappropriation of business property, and grant fraud. All evidence will also be released to the press and the district attorney's office. The air in the room turned thick. My mother exhaled slowly, hands trembling. Eventually, she reached for the pen. I didn't want it to come to this, she whispered. I looked her in the eye. And she shouldn't have taken it this far. Rachel signed next, her handwriting erratic. As she lowered the pen, she muttered, "You'll see. Nobody here really supports you." I smiled. I don't need support, I need the truth to be known. Elaine closed the folder and clipped the acknowledgement page. We'll send notarized copies to all parties. As of today, all operations of Hayes Market will proceed under the sole legal authority of Danielle Hayes. I stood, gathered my things, and didn't look back. Rachel tried to speak again, but I cut her off. I don't need your apology. I don't want your forgiveness. I just need you out of my business, just like you tried to erase me from it. And as I stepped out into the hallway, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Control. Not the naive forgiveness that hopes for reconciliation, not the silent patience that begs to be seen. This was the final boundary, drawn with ink, enforced by law, and sealed with the cold clarity of growing up. 3 months after the final mediation, I moved into a small apartment on the east side of Franklin, close enough to Hayes Market to stay connected, but far enough to feel like I had stepped into a new chapter, one no longer shadowed by anyone else. The apartment had just 2 rooms, a bedroom and a tiny kitchen that opened into the living area. But what gave me peace was that the silence here wasn't the kind that comes from being pushed out. It was the kind I chose. My own voice, my own space. Each morning, I brewed coffee with the old machine my dad used to love, placed the mug by the window, and listened to the wind rustle through the big maple tree out front. No more fake meeting schedules, no more passive-aggressive texts from family. In their place was a new calendar, restructuring Hayes Market, launching a leadership training program for young women, and speaking at community finance workshops. The first week of November, I accepted an invitation from the Middle Tennessee Women in Business Association to speak at an event titled Financial Control and Reclaiming Identity After Being Pushed Aside. The room was packed. A young woman with short hair, probably in her 20s, sitting in the front row, asked me after the talk, "Did you ever forgive them? I'm not sure if I should forgive my mom." I looked at her, then answered gently, "Forgiveness isn't about erasing what they did. It's about being able to walk away without carrying the weight of their choices." She nodded, eyes shimmering. After the talk, I was invited to join a small support group, women who had lost their inheritance, been coerced into signing shady documents, or were told that family comes first, even when that same family shoved them out. We weren't victims anymore. We were learning how to become our own protectors. And maybe protectors for others about to step into the same darkness. One Sunday morning, I stopped by Hayes Market. The new sign hung proudly. Hayes Market, rebuilt from the roots grown by the community. I didn't hire a PR team. I just stayed true to the promise: transparency, accountability, and putting people before profit. I came in early. The store was still empty. I straightened the fruit display and rewrote a few price tags. No one asked me to. But it brought me peace, touching the small things that once fed my entire family and were nearly used to erase me. That afternoon, I dropped by Target for printer paper and some frozen meals. As I pushed my cart through the produce section, I stopped to grab a bunch of kale. When I turned to my right, I saw my mother. She was standing at the end of the aisle, holding a bag of rice, looking tired. No makeup, no designer dress, no Rachel by her side, just her. Quiet, slightly off balance, like the way I used to feel in that house. She saw me too. Our eyes met. No anger, no accusations, no apology. We just looked. I gave a small nod. Not forgiveness, not reconciliation, just a period, placed exactly where it needed to be. She nodded back, her eyes drifting downward. I turned and pushed my cart toward the checkout. As I stepped into the parking lot, the late fall sunlight hit the glass wall of the store, reflecting my image. Small, quiet, but steady. No one could take that from me now. That night, I sat at my small desk in the apartment, opened my laptop, and typed the first line of a book I'd been quietly dreaming about. Unforgotten, rising from the erased pages. I wasn't writing for revenge. I was writing so that people like me could be heard, acknowledged, and handed the pen to tell their own story. And if anyone ever asked, "Danielle, what's your ending?" I would smile and answer, "It's not an ending, it's freedom." Danielle's story is proof that true validation doesn't come from those who once rejected us, but from the journey of standing up for truth and dignity. In a world where blood ties are sometimes used to justify injustice, Danielle chose freedom over silence, justice over endurance. Most of all, she didn't seek revenge with hate, but by living boldly and peacefully, aligned with her values day by day. What do you think of Danielle's choice? Would you have the courage to do the same if you were betrayed? Share your thoughts below, and don't forget to follow the channel for more powerful stories about family and life.